Imagine a world plunged into eternal darkness, a world where the setting sun brought not just the end of light, but the end of safety, warmth, and hope. Millions of years ago, our ancestors, fragile creatures living amongst giant predators, existed in a state of constant, paralyzing fear every time the curtain of night fell. In that darkness, the glowing eyes of saber-toothed tigers and leopards watched, waiting for the slightest lapse in vigilance. For primitive humans, darkness was synonymous with death. But then the greatest revolution in human history occurred. It was a revolution that began not with machines or electricity, but with a tiny, flickering, glowing spark of power. Fire. The question remains, how? How did a creature without complex language, without metal, and certainly without a lighter or matches, learn to master one of nature's most destructive forces? This is not just a story of technique. It is a story of genius observation, relentless patience, and the sheer will of the human spirit to survive. Before we learned how to create fire, we had to learn how to steal it from nature. Fire did not initially come from human hands. It arrived from the heavens and the earth. It came from lightning striking dry forests during scorched summers, from molten lava spilling from volcanic craters, or even from the spontaneous combustion of methane gas in ancient swamps. Our ancestors, the early Homo erectus, initially viewed fire with the same terror as every other animal. Fire was the enemy, the force that devoured everything it touched. But amidst that fear, a spark of curiosity ignited. They observed that after a forest fire passed, even the most ferocious predators fled. They noticed that the remains of animals charred in the flames were not only easier to eat, but possessed an intoxicating aroma and flavor never experienced before. Most importantly, they realized that fire provided warmth, a power that could push back the bone-chilling cold of the blackest night. Our first step toward civilization was the moment a brave, primitive human approached the edge of a dying forest fire, picked up a smoldering branch, and carried it back to their cave. Keeping the fire was the first true survival challenge. In the early stages, humans had no idea how to ignite a new flame, so maintaining the existing fire was a life-or-death mission for the entire tribe. They became devoted fire keepers. The flames were fed day and night with dry wood and animal bones. If the fire went out, it was a catastrophe, a death sentence hanging over the tribe. They learned to transport the fire from place to place by wrapping slow-burning embers in dry moss, clay, or specific types of wood fungi that could retain heat for hours or even days. These were the first biological lighters of humanity. But the real turning point came when humans moved from borrowers to creators. Imagine thousands of years spent observing stones striking one another during the crafting of tools. They noticed that when stones with high iron content, like pyrite, struck quartz with great force, tiny sparks flew. Or when they rubbed dry sticks together to shape weapons, the friction generated a heat that made their palms burn. These random observations converged into the first fire-making techniques. The most common technique, and the one requiring the most immense patience, was wood friction. This was not simply rubbing two sticks together. It was primitive material science. They had to find two types of wood with different hardness. A flat, soft piece of wood served as the hearth, and a hard, straight branch served as the spindle. By placing the spindle into a small notch on the hearth and spinning it rapidly between their palms, the friction produced a fine, black wood powder. This powder was the fuel. When the temperature from friction reached approximately 400 degrees Celsius, the wood dust began to smolder into tiny, glowing embers. But that ember was incredibly fragile. A single breath too strong or a drop of sweat was enough to make it vanish. This was the moment the art of kindling took center stage. The primitive human had to prepare a Tinder Bundle made of dry grass, shredded bark, or animal fur, materials that were extremely flammable. They would gently place the ember into the center of the bundle and begin to blow. Not a harsh blast, but a steady rhythmic stream of air, feeding oxygen to the starving fire. The first thin wisps of smoke would appear. The rich smell of burning wood would fill the air, and then, snap, a small flame would burst into life. In that moment, humans were no longer slaves to nature. They had become the masters of energy. Fire fundamentally altered our biology. Before fire, humans had to spend most of their days simply chewing tough raw plants and stringy raw meat. The digestive system had to work incredibly hard and consumed massive amounts of energy. But when fire arrived, it pre-digested the food for us. Cooked protein and starch were far easier to absorb, providing a massive caloric boost to the brain. There is a famous scientific hypothesis that it was through eating cooked food that our intestines shortened and our brains began to explode in size. Fire literally sculpted our intelligence. Furthermore, fire created social time. Before fire, when the sun set, all activity ceased. But with the firelight in the cave, the day was extended. This was when humans sat together around the hearth, shared food, and began to tell the very first stories. Language evolved here, social rules were formed here, and spiritual beliefs sprouted from the flickering shadows on the cave walls. The fire did not just warm the body, it warmed the soul and bound individuals into a cohesive tribe. Additionally, fire was the ultimate defensive weapon. No predator, no matter how powerful, did not fear the sting of heat and the glare of blinding light. A fire placed at the mouth of a cave was like an invisible wall of protection, allowing our ancestors, for the first time in history, to achieve deep and safe sleep. This quality of sleep further accelerated the development of the nervous system. One could say that every beat of modern civilization originated from the flickering flames in those damp, ancient caves. The process of mastering fire was not an event that happened overnight. It was a journey spanning hundreds of thousands of years, moving from fear to observation to preservation and finally to creation. It is a testament to the power of human attention to detail. How did they know which fungus was the driest for holding embers? How did they know which stones would spark upon impact? It was the result of countless failures, countless freezing nights endured because the fire died, and the passing of experience from one generation to the next. Fire also opened the era of new tools. Primitive humans realized that if they heated wooden spears over a fire, the wood became harder and more durable. They used fire to hollow out massive logs to create the first dugout canoes. Fire helped them clear dense jungles, ward off insects, and sanitize their living environments. Each new application of fire was a rung on the ladder, taking humans away from the life of beasts and closer to the definition of human. In this section, we have witnessed how creatures with nothing in their hands defeated the darkness through sheer will. We have seen that fire is not just a physical tool, but a biological and social catalyst. But the journey of mastering fire did not end with creating a spark from dry wood. In the next part, we will delve into more sophisticated fire-making techniques, the secrets of flint, and how the flame led us to metallurgy, architecture, and eventually the conquest of the entire planet. Prepare yourself, for the fire of knowledge is still burning, and we have only just begun to explore its true power. Beyond the simple act of creating a spark from wood friction, the journey of mastering fire was an evolution of chemistry and strategic engineering. As our ancestors moved across the globe, they encountered different environments that demanded more sophisticated methods. They discovered the secret of striking stone, the world's first high-tech ignition system. They realized that certain rocks, when struck together, didn't just break. They bled fire. By striking flint against iron pyrites, they could produce a shower of sparks much hotter and more consistent than wood friction. This was the Iron Age of fire-making, long before humans ever learned to smelt metal. They began to carry fire kits in small leather pouches containing flint, a striker stone, and char cloth made from charred plant fibers. This portability meant that humans were no longer anchored to a single hearth. We became a mobile species, capable of carrying the sun in our pockets as we crossed mountains and oceans. The mastery of fire also led to the birth of landscape engineering. Early humans learned that fire was not just a tool for the cave, but a tool for the continent. They practiced controlled burning, clearing away dense, impenetrable undergrowth to encourage the growth of new grass, which in turn attracted large game animals like deer and bison. They were not just hunters, they were environmental managers, using the flame to reshape the very ecology of the earth to suit human needs. This intentional use of fire transformed the wild forests into curated parklands, effectively farming the wild long before the first seeds were ever planted. Furthermore, fire opened the door to the transformation of matter. This was the dawn of alchemy. Our ancestors noticed that clay, when placed in the heart of a fire, turned from soft mud into rock-hard ceramic. This led to the creation of vessels that could hold water and store food, protecting it from rodents and decay. Later, they discovered that certain green stones would weep liquid metal when thrown into a high-temperature blaze. This was the birth of metallurgy. Copper, bronze, and eventually iron were all born from the fire. Without the mastery of the flame, we would still be living in a world of stone and wood. Every skyscraper, every car, and every smartphone in our modern world is a direct descendant of that first controlled fire. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of fire mastery was its role in warfare and dominance. Fire was the first weapon of mass destruction. A tribe that could control fire could incinerate the defenses of their enemies or drive them out of their territories. It became a symbol of status and divine right. The eternal flame became a staple of early religions, a representation of the human spirit's endurance and our connection to the celestial bodies. We began to see ourselves as separate from the animal kingdom. We were the Promethean creatures, the ones who had stolen the power of the gods to light our own path. As we look at the legacy of fire, we see that it is the thread that connects the ancient cave to the modern laboratory. The internal combustion engine in your car is simply a controlled, high-speed series of fires. The rockets that carry us to the moon are propelled by the same chemical principles our ancestors glimpsed when they watched a log hiss and pop in the dark. We have taken that small, fragile ember from 30,000 years ago and expanded it into a global civilization powered by heat. As the dawn of the human story continues to unfold, we realize that we are still the fire bringers. We have moved from burning wood to burning coal, then oil, and now we are learning to harness the fire of the stars themselves through nuclear fusion. The journey that started with a brave soul Nat Lay, a burning branch, has led us to the threshold of the universe. We did not just survive the darkness, we turned it into a canvas for our brilliance. The flame of knowledge, ignited by our ancestors, continues to burn in every discovery we make and every horizon we cross. We are the masters of the flame, and as long as that fire burns, the human story will never end.